Have you ever been told that you weren't important enough to attend your own son's wedding? Not because you had done something wrong, not because you were a bad mother, but because the wedding is only for people who matter. Those were the exact words my future daughter-in-law said to me. I stood there, smiling, pretending they didn't hurt. Then I quietly walked away. 3 days later, my phone buzzed. It was a text from the same woman. "Hi, Susan. We're a little short on the wedding budget. Could you send us $10,000? We'd really appreciate it." I stared at the screen, reading it over and over again. The woman who told me I didn't matter suddenly needed my money. She thought I'd say yes. She had absolutely no idea who she had just insulted or what that one text message was about to cost her. But before I tell you how everything fell apart, let me take you back to the day I realized my son was marrying the wrong woman. If you enjoy emotional family stories filled with betrayal, unexpected twists, and satisfying endings, don't forget to subscribe. Every week, we bring you unforgettable stories that remind us kindness always wins in the end. Now, let's begin. My name is Susan Parker. I'm 56 years old. For most of my life, being a mother wasn't just part of who I was, it was everything. My husband Michael passed away from cancer when our son Daniel was only 15. One day, I was a wife raising a happy teenager. The next, I was a widow trying to hold our world together. There were nights when I cried myself to sleep. Not because I missed Michael, although I did, but because I had no idea how I was going to pay the mortgage, or Daniel's school tuition, or keep food on the table. Still, every morning, I smiled, because my son needed hope, not fear. I worked wherever I could. Morning shifts at a local bakery. Evening bookkeeping for a small construction company. Weekends cleaning offices. Sometimes, I worked 3 jobs at once. Daniel noticed, more than I realized. One afternoon, when he was 16, I found him secretly washing dishes at a neighborhood diner. "What are you doing here?" He looked embarrassed. "I'm helping. You shouldn't be working." "You should be studying," he smiled sadly. "You shouldn't be working 3 jobs either." I hugged him so tightly. Neither of us could stop crying. Life wasn't easy, but we survived. Daniel earned a scholarship to college, graduated with honors, found a great job as a software engineer. The day he received his first paycheck, he drove straight to my house. Without saying a word, he handed me an envelope. Inside was enough money to pay off the last of my debts. "I learned generosity from you, Mom. I'll never let you struggle again." In that moment, I knew every sacrifice had been worth it. 2 years later, Daniel called me. His voice sounded happier than I'd ever heard. "Mom, I met someone." I smiled immediately. "I was wondering when you'd finally say those words." He laughed. "Her name is Emily. She's incredible." A month later, I finally met her. She was beautiful, perfectly dressed, confident, very confident, too confident. She smiled, but her eyes didn't. The first thing she asked me wasn't about my family or my hobbies. Instead, she looked around my modest home and said, "So, have you always lived here?" I nodded. "Yes. It's a lovely neighborhood." She smiled politely, I guess. Something about that answer didn't sit right with me. Over the following months, I tried. I really did. I invited Emily to dinner, bought thoughtful birthday gifts, even knitted her a beautiful winter scarf by hand. She thanked me, but everything felt cold, distant, calculated. Whenever Daniel left the room, Emily's smile disappeared. She barely spoke to me. Then, the moment Daniel returned, she became warm again. I convinced myself, maybe she was just shy. I wanted to believe that. For Daniel's sake. Then one Sunday afternoon, the 3 of us met for lunch. Daniel excused himself to answer a phone call, leaving Emily and me alone. She slowly stirred her coffee. Without looking up, she asked, "So, have you started thinking about helping with the wedding?" I smiled. "Of course. I'd love to help however I can." She looked directly into my eyes. "Good. Because weddings are expensive." I nodded. "They certainly are." She leaned back. "My parents are paying for the venue. They expect your side to contribute too." I quietly asked, "What did you have in mind?" She shrugged. "I don't know, maybe $20,000 or $30,000. I almost dropped my coffee. "I'm sorry. I don't have that kind of money." Her expression changed instantly. "Oh. I assumed Daniel would have told you." "Told me what?" "Never mind." For the rest of lunch, she barely spoke. On the drive home, something inside me felt uneasy, not because she asked about money, but because of the disappointment on her face when I said no. A few weeks later, Daniel excitedly invited me to help choose wedding flowers. I'd love that. But the night before, he called again. His voice sounded uncomfortable. Mom, Emily thinks it would be easier if only the bridal party came tomorrow. I forced a smile. Oh, that's okay. You don't have to pretend. I know you're disappointed. No, I understand. After we hung up, I sat alone in my living room, looking at Michael's photograph, quietly whispering, I wish you were here. Then came the engagement party. I spent hours baking Daniel's favorite chocolate cake. The same recipe I'd made every birthday since he turned 6. When I arrived, Emily barely looked at it. Oh, we already ordered a designer cake. One of her friends laughed. That's cute, though. Cute. 30 years of memories, reduced to one word. Daniel hugged me. Thanks for making it, Mom. He genuinely meant it, but Emily simply carried my cake into the kitchen. It was never served. A month later, wedding invitations were mailed. My neighbors received theirs. Daniel's childhood friends received theirs. Even distant relatives received theirs. Mine never arrived. At first, I assumed it had been lost in the mail. Then, one evening, I drove to Daniel's apartment. Emily opened the door. Daniel wasn't home. Can I help you? I smiled politely. I think my invitation got lost. For a few seconds, she simply stared at me. Then, she folded her arms and said the sentence, that changed everything. Actually, the wedding is only for people who matter. I felt the air leave my lungs. I'm sorry. What? She didn't hesitate. We're keeping the guest list exclusive. Family, friends, important business connections. You just don't really fit the atmosphere. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I'm Daniel's mother. She shrugged. I know, but that doesn't automatically make someone important. For a moment, I couldn't speak. I simply turned around, walked back to my car, and drove home in complete silence. I never imagined that just 3 days later, the same woman would send me a message, begging for $10,000 for 3 days. I couldn't stop hearing Emily's voice. The wedding is only for people who matter. I had replayed those words again and again, trying to understand how the little boy I had raised could fall in love with someone capable of saying something so cruel. The worst part wasn't the insult. It was knowing. Daniel had no idea it had happened. I picked up my phone countless times, ready to tell him. Every single time, I put it back down. I didn't want to be the mother who forced her son to choose between his fiancée and his family. So, I stayed silent. I thought the pain would simply fade with time. I was wrong. 3 mornings later, my phone buzzed while I was watering the flowers Michael had planted years before he passed away. The message was from Emily. For a second, I thought maybe she wanted to apologize. I opened it. Instead, I read, Hi, Susan. Hope you're doing well. We're a little short on the wedding budget. Would you be able to send us $10,000 by Friday? It would really help us. Thanks so much. I stared at the screen, then read it again. And again. She had excluded me from the wedding, but still expected me to pay for it. I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was unbelievable. I placed the phone on the kitchen counter, walked into the living room, looked at Michael's photograph, and quietly said, You would have loved this one. For the first time in weeks, I smiled. Not out of happiness, out of disbelief. I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I made coffee, sat on the porch, and thought. If I refused, Emily would probably tell Daniel I never supported them. If I agreed, I'd be rewarding disrespect. Neither option felt right. Then, an idea quietly entered my mind. Not revenge, just the truth. That evening, Emily sent another message. Just checking if you saw my text. 5 minutes later, another. The venue deposit is due soon. Then another. Daniel doesn't know I'm asking you. That sentence caught my attention. He doesn't know. So, she was asking for money behind his back. Interesting, very interesting. The next afternoon, Daniel stopped by my house after work. He smiled the moment he walked in. Mom? It smells like cinnamon rolls. I laughed. Some things never change. He hugged me tightly. For a few minutes, everything felt normal. Then, I asked as casually as I could, so. How's the wedding planning? He groaned. It's exhausting. I believe it. We're already over budget. I looked at him carefully. Oh, by how much? He shrugged. I honestly don't know. Emily handles most of it. Then he smiled. But don't worry. We'll figure it out. I looked directly into his eyes. You've never asked me for money, he frowned. No. Why would I? My heart sank. He truly didn't know. I changed the subject. I wasn't ready, not yet. As he left, he hugged me again. I love you, Mom. I love you too. Watching him drive away, I realized something. Emily wasn't just manipulating me. She was hiding things from him too. The following weekend, I received an invitation. Not to the wedding, to the bridal shower. At first, I almost declined. Then, I decided to go. Not because I felt welcome, because I wanted to understand exactly who Emily really was. The shower was held at an upscale country club. Crystal chandeliers, designer decorations, champagne fountains, everything looked expensive. When I arrived, Emily barely acknowledged me. "Oh, you came!" I smiled politely. "I was invited," one of her bridesmaids whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Isn't she the one who said she couldn't help financially?" Several women laughed quietly. Emily didn't stop them. She simply smiled and sipped her champagne. About an hour later, a wedding planner walked over carrying several invoices. Emily sighed dramatically. "I don't know how we're going to cover everything," one bridesmaid asked. "Didn't Daniel's mom offer to help?" Emily rolled her eyes. "She said she's broke." The room became awkwardly quiet. I calmly placed my teacup on the table. "I never said that." Emily looked surprised. "What?" "I said I couldn't contribute $30,000. Those aren't the same thing." Her smile disappeared. Trying to recover, she laughed. "Well, maybe you'll surprise us." Several guests looked toward me, waiting. I simply smiled. "Perhaps." Then I stood, thanked the hostess, and quietly left. I noticed several women watching Emily with confused expressions. For the first time, the perfect image she had created had begun to crack. 2 days later, another message arrived. "Susan, I'm really stressed. Could you please send the $10,000? You'd be helping Daniel too." "This time," I replied, "I'd rather discuss money in person." She answered almost immediately. "Perfect. Let's meet tomorrow." Exactly what I wanted. The next afternoon, we met at a quiet coffee shop. Emily arrived 20 minutes late, designer handbag, luxury sunglasses, brand new shoes. Nothing about her suggested someone struggling financially. She sat down, ordered the most expensive drink on the menu, then smiled. "So, about the money." I folded my hands. "What exactly is it for?" She sighed dramatically. "Flowers, catering, decorations. It's all adding up." I nodded slowly. "I understand." Then I asked, "Does Daniel know you're asking me?" For the first time, she hesitated. "Not exactly, so." "No." She looked uncomfortable. I didn't want him worrying. I quietly reached into my purse, pulled out an envelope, and placed it on the table. Her eyes lit up immediately. "I knew you'd help." She grabbed the envelope, opened it, then frowned. Inside, there wasn't a check. There was only one sheet of paper. She unfolded it. It read, "Respect costs nothing. Until you learn that, you won't receive a single dollar from me." Emily's face turned bright red. She slowly looked up. "You've got to be kidding me." I calmly stood. "No. I'm finally taking you seriously." She clenched the paper in her hand. "You'll regret embarrassing me." I smiled politely. "No, Emily. I think you're about to regret underestimating me." Then I walked out. Without looking back, I had no idea that Emily's next move would force Daniel to learn the truth about everything the morning after our meeting. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Emily called. 6 times. I didn't answer. Then came the texts. "You're being selfish. You're ruining our wedding. Daniel will never forgive you." I read every message, then quietly set my phone aside. Because for the first time, I wasn't afraid of disappointing someone who had never respected me. That afternoon, there was a knock at my front door. When I opened it, Daniel stood there. His face looked exhausted. His eyes searched mine. "Mom, can we talk?" I stepped aside. "Of course." We sat at the kitchen table where he'd done his homework as a child. Neither of us spoke for a moment. Finally, he sighed. "Emily said you embarrassed her yesterday." I looked at him calmly. "Did she tell you why?" He hesitated. "She said, 'You refused to support the wedding.'" I nodded. "And did she tell you she asked me for $10,000? "Without telling you." His expression changed immediately. "What?" I quietly picked up my phone, opened our conversation, then slid it across the table, read it. The room became completely silent. Daniel read every message. His face slowly lost all color. He scrolled back further, then further, reading every request, every excuse, every manipulation. When he reached the message that said, Daniel doesn't know I'm asking you. He stopped. His hands started shaking. She hid this from me. I nodded. Yes. He looked up. Tears filled his eyes. Why didn't you tell me? I smiled sadly. Because I didn't want to become the reason you questioned the woman you loved. He covered his face. Oh my God. For nearly 5 minutes, neither of us spoke. Finally, Daniel whispered, Mom, did she really say, you weren't important enough for the wedding? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The silence answered for me. He looked completely devastated. When? The day I asked about my invitation. His eyes filled with tears. I'm so sorry. I failed you. I reached across the table and gently held his hand. No, you were deceived too. Daniel stood so suddenly, his chair nearly tipped over. I'm going to talk to her. I quietly said, Don't go there angry. He nodded. I won't, but the first need the truth. Then he left. 3 hours later, my phone rang. It was Daniel. His voice was barely recognizable. Mom, it's over. I closed my eyes. What happened? I showed her the messages, and she admitted everything. He took a shaky breath, then she said, Your mom should have been grateful I even considered inviting her. I felt my heart break, not for myself, for my son. I asked her, Do you even understand what my mother sacrificed for me? Daniel continued. She looked at me and said, People need to stop living in the past. Another long silence. Then, I took off the engagement ring. I walked away. The wedding was canceled that evening, the venue, the caterer, the florist, everything. By morning, friends and family were calling nonstop. Some had heard rumors. Others wanted answers. Daniel gave everyone the same response. I won't marry someone who doesn't respect my mother. That single sentence spread through both families. A week later, Emily came to my house. For the first time, she wasn't wearing designer clothes. No expensive handbag, no confident smile. She looked tired, nervous, almost frightened. When I opened the door, she immediately said, I just want to explain. I remained calm. You have 5 minutes. She nodded. I made mistakes. I was stressed. I wasn't thinking. I quietly asked, Were you stressed? The day you told me I didn't matter? She looked down. No. Were you stressed? When you secretly asked me for $10,000, silence. No. Were you stressed? When you lied to Daniel? Another silence. No. I nodded. So those weren't mistakes. They were choices. A tear rolled down her face. I've lost everything, I answered gently. No, you lost something. Because of your choices. There's a difference. She couldn't look at me. I really am sorry. I believe you. She looked up with hope. Then I softly added, But an apology doesn't erase the consequences. She slowly nodded. I understand. For the first time, I think she truly did. She quietly walked away. And I never saw her again. 6 months later, life had settled into a peaceful rhythm again. Daniel moved into a smaller apartment. He focused on work, on healing, on rebuilding his confidence. One Sunday afternoon, he invited me to lunch. As we finished dessert, he smiled. I met someone, I laughed. Already? He grinned. It's not serious. But she insisted on meeting you first. I raised an eyebrow. Really, she said. If the man I'm dating loves his mother, I want to meet the woman who raised him. For the first time in a long time, I saw genuine happiness in my son's eyes. A month later, I met Grace. She wasn't flashy. She wasn't interested in appearances. When she arrived at my house, she hugged me before sitting down. Then she noticed an old framed photograph of Michael. Is that Daniel's father? I smiled. Yes. She walked over, looked at the picture for a moment, then quietly said, He must have been proud of both of you. That simple sentence told me more about her character than any expensive gift ever could. As the months passed, Grace became part of our family naturally. She helped me cook Thanksgiving dinner. She laughed at Daniel's terrible jokes. She listened more than she spoke. Most importantly, she treated people with kindness, whether they were wealthy or struggling. One evening, Daniel pulled me aside. Mom, I finally understand something. What? You spent my whole childhood teaching me. That character matters more than money. I almost forgot. But thanks to you, I remembered before it was too late. I smiled through tears. Your father would be proud. So am I. Ending people often believe respect is earned through money, status, or influence.